Hello, 5th grade. We are in a slightly different setting. I am not in my classroom. I am in my home. This is my library, which most of the books aren't visible. They're on this side. There's a wall of bookcases. And then we've got a little one back there. So, anyways, hurrah. This week in history, Captain James Cook. How fascinating. I love teaching this every year. It's so fun. James Cook is fantastic. So I'm going to go through the notes just like I did last time, and I'm going to, add in extra things because lectures and fun, and there's a lot more details than I can get into one page of notes. So let's talk about that. Captain James Cook, 1728 to 1779. He was born in a small village in northern England. The name of the village was actually Marton in Cleveland. Literally 3 words with hyphens. That was very common in England. A lot of the names are like 3 words of something on the Thames or Stratford upon Avon. Avon is a river, which is Shakespeare's home, if you didn't know. Stratford upon Avon is Shakespeare. So a lot of towns in England actually are like this, where it's 3 names and they're hyphenated, and that's the actual name of the place. It's not just Marton. It's Marton in Cleveland, to make sure you know which Marton. So anyways, he was born there. His father was a farm worker, which means his family was not wealthy at all. This doesn't mean the father owned the farm. This means the father worked for the person who owned the farm and got money by working on someone else's farm for them. So at 17, they moved to the coastal town of Staithes, 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 in Yorkshire. He is there for 1 year, and in your notes, it's kind of deceiving. It says worked for a coal merchant. That was actually a year later. He moves to Whitby, which is also on the coast, and he begins working for a coal merchant there in 1746 when he was 18. So, I can't fit everything. Okay. In 1755, when he's 27, he enlists in the Navy, and he is sent to North America. Notice this is 1755. This is before the American Revolution, or rather, I apologize, the American War for Independence has happened. And so he is actually still trying to figure out, and England is still trying to figure out exactly what all is there land-wise, because this is before Lewis and Clark. Nobody knows what is to the west. They kind of have a limit of the Mississippi River at this point. No one's gone really beyond that. Or, in fact, at this point, Missouri River. No one has gone very far west at all. So he is sent there to start charting up maps of what there is around the 13 colonies. They aren't even going that far west. They're staying mostly in the area we already know, or they already knew. But they were trying to survey and chart maps for more accurate information, which is called cartography. Haha. Every good exploratory mission always has a cartographer. Has a cartographer along with it so that you can keep track of this. Lewis and Clark had one with them on theirs. So, it's helpful to know where you've been, and also so that people can replicate how to get where you got. So, he is learning to survey and chart maps. And then in 1761, no, that's not a mistake. I know it says 69 in your notes. I will explain. In 1761, there's a Venus transit. A Venus transit is when the planet Venus passes in front of the sun. Now, please do not be confused with when the moon has an eclipse over the sun, because with the moon, it covers the sun. Hold on, let me grab my whiteboard. Pacha! I have all my whiteboards. Okay, a Venus transit is not the same thing. With an eclipse, the sun is here, and the moon is here. And this is all dark, okay? And you don't really have any light. The temperature drops. It's crazy. Like I told you in class, it's like Charm, where the light is gone, there is no sound of birds, all animals are quiet, it gets cold, like really quite cold because you don't have the heat of the sun. Venus transit is different. A Venus transit is where here is the sun, and Venus is like this big in comparison to the sun. I'm sorry, I'm next to a window, so it's messing with the lighting. Venus is like this big in comparison to the sun, and Venus goes tick, 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 across like that. It does not cover it at all, because Venus is very small in comparison. So it just works its happy little way across, like a little black dot, and then goes away, like that. And he moves across like that. So, Venus transit is not an eclipse. Please do not think that the planet Venus blots out the sun in the Venus transit. It doesn't. It's called a transit because word, I'm not sure if you'll get bonus points with Mrs. Brash for mentioning that one. But, trans in Latin means across. I think you have some spelling words: transact, transition, transit, transportation. So anyways, transit does not mean it's covering it. It means that it's going across it, but it's not covering at all because Venus is, far away. So the Venus transit happens in 1761. Now, when a Venus transit happens, it happens 8 years apart. So there's one, and then 8 years goes by, and then another transit happens. And so there's one that happens in 61. And everybody knows, because there are recordings of this, that it will happen again in about 8 years. So everybody gets this massive bug to go exploring because, oh my goodness, space, the final frontier. So everybody suddenly is up and ready to just go and find things like madmen. Because, of course, remember, with the Peace of Westphalia, you weren't allowed to make war with people. So that option for entertainment is out. And you also don't really have another Renaissance happening because you've already sort of gotten all of your innovations. So that's also out. And you can't really go and conquer new places unless you find new places to conquer. So people all start going crazy finding stuff. And at this point, the Pacific hadn't really been explored very much at all. Nearly nothing. And a lot of the islands in the Pacific and some of the islands in the Atlantic had not really been explored. Like New Zealand, we were about to hear about New Zealand. But they hadn't really been explored. So everybody gets really excited to go out and just do stuff. So they know another one's going to happen. One happens in 1761, so they know another one's going to happen at some point in 1769. However, it is only visible if you're in the southern hemisphere, which means you're below the equator. So Cook is sent on a mission to observe it in the HMS Endeavour. By the way, if you don't know this, if you ever see British ships, they all have HMS at the front of the name, or like most of them have HMS like this at the front of the name. That's because it's His Majesty's service, or His Majesty's ship. Or in this case, because it's currently Queen Elizabeth II, Her Majesty's ship. So, His Majesty's ship, the Endeavour, because it is a king at this point, not a queen, is sent out with Cook in it to go and see the second Venus transit, transit that's going to happen in 1769. So he has 2 voyages. Wait, I'm sorry. I was going to say this other thing. With it happens 243 years apart with the Venus transit. So you missed the last one, I'm afraid to tell you. The last one happened in 2004. And then there was another one 8 years later, which means that the very last time we had a Venus transit was in 2012. So unfortunately, you guys didn't know about it, so I'm guessing you probably missed it. But if you look up news articles, you can see pictures of it. Very nice pictures in high definition. So there you go. Which also means 243 years, it's going to be 2117 and 2125 when the next ones happen. 2117 and 2125 when the next Venus transit happens. So you guys kind of missed your chance on that one. Sorry. But you can find photos. And that's important. Okay. So, then after this, he has 2 voyages that go from 1771 to 1775, where he goes and visits New Zealand and also Tahiti. Ooh. And he almost makes it actually down to the Antarctic. He's exploring, but remember, this is the 1700s. They don't have a massive amount of heavy-duty equipment or hyper-durable ships because they're wood. So going actually to the Antarctic would be beyond challenging. So he doesn't quite make it, but, he gives it a good effort and, participation award for him. So then he takes a 3rd voyage. He goes with 2 ships, the HMS Resolution and the HMS Discovery, His Majesty's ship. And he is trying to find what they're calling is the Northwest Passage. By this, they think that there is a passage above North America and like somewhere around Canada where you can cross through water and make it there. Kind of similar to what Columbus was trying to do by getting to India. However, much like Columbus, he does not succeed. He does not find a new continent, but he does find some new islands. So he goes around and he can't find it, so he goes south. So the Northwest Passage, just to review, because it says it in your notes, it was a body of water connecting the Atlantic to the Pacific, which people were really hoping to find so that you could go around the globe easier. He doesn't find it, because there's not really one, unless you go through a lot of ice. So he goes south instead and discovers Hawaii in 1778, which normally would seem like a very good thing and very exciting. However, it's not going to turn out super well for him. So he stops by Hawaii, and this is the first time Hawaii's been discovered. And so they hang around for a bit, and the people believe that they are gods. Because they appear magically in this ship with giant sails, well, 2 ships with giant sails, and they think that these people from afar are gods. So they hang around Hawaii for a while, and then they actually leave, try to discover more things to the west. They come back a year later in 1779, and this is where things go awry. It doesn't say this in your notes, but this is a fun backstory. So when they get back there, one of the people on their ship dies. Now, the people have thought they are gods, but if you can die, you are not a god. And so the islanders immediately start to be more suspicious of them, because they're sitting there going, well, we said you were gods, and you said, oh yes, we are gods. Ah, ha 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 ha, treat us well, we are gods. And yet one of you has just died. So you all are raving liars, or one of you was not a god and you just didn't tell us that he was the only one who wasn't a god. So immediately the islanders are much more suspicious, and they get upset, and they do not like that people are there. Now, part of when they were there was they were doing a lot of trading and picking up a lot of things from the Hawaiian Islands, and trading like metal objects, iron, like little knives, pots, pans, etc., for things from the islands that they could take back to England and show to everyone from these Hawaiian Islands. And so they were doing a lot of this trading. Keep this in mind, that they're trading a lot of metal objects, because it will come back in a moment. But I'm going to digress slightly and then come back to it. When they got here, Cook in 1778 had named them the Sandwich Islands. I know it's a funny name. The reason is because in England there's actually a province called Sandwich, and no, it's not named after the food. The food is actually named after it. And John Montagu was the Earl of Sandwich at this time, and he was one of the patrons of this voyage, this exploratory voyage of Cook's. And so he named the islands after him because, you know, he paid for a lot of the stuff that they had for their voyage. So he called them the Sandwich Islands. They are still sometimes referred to as that instead of Hawaii. Other thing I should mention, it is technically Hawaii instead of Hawaii, but I will continue to be hyper-American and say, well, no, I'll probably switch over to Hawaii. It's Hawaii. So, anyways, relations have cooled. The islanders are highly suspect, because these people have claimed they are gods, and now they clearly are not gods. One of them has died. So, things get a little intense. And finally, on Valentine's Day in 1779, things come to a head. What happens is, some of the islanders get angry, and they steal one of the ship's boats. It was actually from HMS Discovery. They stole one of the boats from HMS Discovery, a cutter. And Cook was very upset about this, and he wanted to make a point about, you don't steal from us, because clearly there had been some tension for a while. So Cook and some of his men go on shore in Hawaii, and they find one of the chieftains. With Hawaii, how it works is there was one king who was in charge of kind of everything, and then there were minor chieftains around, sort of like in Scotland, who controlled portions of an island or one of the islands, and they all answered back to this one king, but there were multiple chieftains. So they decide to kidnap one of the chieftains to make them give the boat back. This is a very bad idea when you are outnumbered on an island hundreds of miles, thousands of miles from your home, with no backup. They decide to steal this person, so they steal him. His wife freaks out, understandably, because some random people come into their house and steal her husband. So she gets everybody up in alarm because they're kidnapping her husband. And so then on the beach, the islanders catch up with Cook and this poor chieftain, and a scuffle ensues. And when this scuffle ensues, And they're trying to get back to the ship. Cook is knocked down and then stabbed with a knife that he had traded to the Islanders, because remember, they were trading metal objects and the Islanders didn't really have metal objects. He is stabbed with one of the knives that he actually traded to them, and he dies. And that is irony. Sorry, that was a joke, because irony. Miss Harkin humor, one of the things that you probably don't miss. And Mrs. Straka's humor, one of the other things you probably don't miss. So anyways, he is stabbed and dies. Now, this is where your notes end. However, this is not where the story ends. The Islanders have a tradition in Hawaii, my apologies, that when someone would die, what they would do, and hear me out because I'm going to explain it, they would boil the person's body and then bury them. Now, there was a rumor, and this kind of got spread to everybody, that they would boil the person and then eat them because they were cannibals. No, they are not. What they believed was your soul was trapped inside of your body after you died. And so the way to release and let someone's soul go to heaven and go to the afterlife was you had to boil their body so the spirit could get out, and then you would bury the body. And you would keep the bones, but bury the rest of it. And then the bones you would actually put in a special place, and you would actually honor them in that way. I know it sounds weird, but that's just what they would do. It sounds odd. But anyways, people would say that they were cannibals because they would see them boil a body, but they didn't realize they weren't eating it. They're trying to release the soul, but they don't really need to. But anyways, that's what they would do. Which, irony of irony, first off, he's stabbed with a knife that he traded them. It's made out of iron. Irony. And then Cook literally gets cooked. Which is very dark humor. I apologize. I do find it slightly funny, though. Okay, so that is our notes on Captain James Cook. Poor fellow. And the resurgence that started to happen in a lot of exploration. I hope you have found this helpful. Your quiz will be on Friday. No notes. Don't tell your parents you're allowed to use notes. No. And study up on that. You can rewatch this, should you choose it. Make sure that you read through your notes after you have written them at least one time, and please review on Thursday. Do not try to cram all your information in on Friday morning before your parent comes into your room and goes, "Hey, it's history quiz time." No, review on Thursday. All right, I hope you have a wonderful day, and that's all I got for you, honestly.